Yeah.
Awesome. Hello, welcome to Crackcast number 336. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Pipface, Tanzarine, and Baines. Oh, hello.
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 Hello, guys. Today we're going to be talking about romance as a side dish. Now, this is something Tanzarine came up with in her news post, and it has had quite a few responses so far, so we've got lots to read out, which is really good. Romance as a side dish. So this was something you came up with, Tance, after a post by Used Books, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's exactly what I was gonna say. That I can't get the full credit for this because I was racing for out and I had no ideas, but Vicky had a very interesting Facebook post where she was talking about what she likes and what she doesn't like in terms of, romantic plots and everything. So I said, okay. I asked for her permission to basically steal some of that. There you go. We have a new post.
It's always good to get inspiration for those things. All right, so that's what we're going to be chatting about. But first, I've got to introduce the featured comic. So here we go. Featured comic. Oh, the featured comic. Kwai came up with that this week. So we have got a featured comic. I was just going to say, here's Kwai with a featured comic and not say anything. The featured comic was Tomb Busters. And it looks really cool. Some fantastic, funky artwork there.
Neat title.
Yeah, Tomb Busters. So take it away, Kwai.
Hello, this is Kwaide Gakse, and the feature I've selected for this week is Tomb Busters by Stork Studio, and it is rated T14. A young orphan, a mysterious man in a cloak, a gorilla that can sing Italian opera, a cute little green dinosaur. Welcome to the planet Barter, a planet that is supposedly a black market planet. Chapter 1 starts off with a young girl talking to a ghost in the junkyard, but soon it becomes apparent that the people of this world have an every person for themselves mentality. We soon learn there is a band of outlaw treasure hunters that is also hanging out on this planet. This comic is filled with action-packed chasing sequences and gorgeous art. This comic was written by John Stork, with the art drawn by Raul Trevino. This is an excellent example of a successful collaboration comic because the story writing is very original and funny, and the art style is wonderfully lined and inked. Trevino draws excellent renderings of cars. Hop on the seat of a high-speed motorcycle chase and read Tomb Busters by Stork Studio, rated T.
And that was Kwai with Tomb Busters. Alright, so now we have the featured music to introduce that Gumwallace has given us for this week. And Gumwallace has given us a theme tune to Mindfold. Now, Mindfold is a comic by Fallopian Crusader. Thank you very much for that, Fallopian Crusader. You've got a fantastic comic, and we all love it. This is an earlier comic by Fallopian, so I hope you read that. So the music, I would describe it as a tune that fits very well with its title. You can feel your mind folding with this gorgeous, echoing, evocative, multicultural influenced sound, featuring all manner of crystalline ringing synths, soaring violins, drums, and so much more. This would fit well with a high-concept cyberpunk anime. So, take it away, Gunwallace. that was the music by Gumwallers. I hope you enjoyed that. I did. Okay, so to the topic. Romance as a side dish. Tans, would you like to give us
Side dish, love, love, love.
Would I like?
Would you like to give us a bit of a read through of this concept here as you've described it?
A read through. Okay, you want me to read the entire thing? I will. But that makes me be last in the rotation afterwards. So okay.
That's fine.
So the other day I read a very interesting post on Wiki of Used Books where she was talking about romance. And what caught my eye the most was her description of the driving force between romance stories as a relationship-driven conflict. To put it. It's exactly that which inspired me to talk today about romance in comics that do not fall under the romance genre. How romance can be used to support and promote a plot that has a different conflict focus, being, for example, a thriller or an adventure or a mystery, committed to telling the story or of a couple as the central conflict. The trouble with romance is that everything revolves around whether two people will become a couple and stay that way until the end. Utilizing love triangles or other obstacles to that couple's bond together is never all about romance. A ton of things happen in tandem alongside whatever conflict is taking place relationship-wise. Often in real life, those other things by nature take center stage. Romantic stories, they are forced not to, unless appealing. But that isn't the case when romance is rather than the main course. How people act or react to the object of their affection often is a catalyst in place, and thus romance is a good plot device or manner to advance the plot. A love with another one may refuse to see that the object of his or her affection is detrimental to his or her main objective.
Okay.
Another character might refuse to see what their love interest is, or that their love interest is the enemy, or they might be blinded in their own causes. I'm paraphrasing because I don't want to read the entire thing. Be blinded to what they should or shouldn't do, and they might stray from their own goals, or they might be blindsided if they are in love, or if they fall out of love with a person, or if they have unrequited love, for example. They might invest more in an effort to get some kind of response, or they may be full of this unrequited affection that they have. And in that sense, people reacting to their emotions is a catalyst for the bigger plot, for the bigger picture, without it being the main event.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I wanted to say, that if you have romance, it can be very, very supportive of your main plot, and it can create a lot of engagement without it sounding unrealistic, without it being the center stage, and without having people always ask about the other woman or the other man saying, I'm going to steal so and so from the other person, and that's your plot.
Yeah.
Which basically often takes place in vacuum of life in general. It's like, sometimes I have watched romance stories and felt like shouting at people, you don't have any problems, that's why this is your problem. And I disagree. I disengage. I actually am exasperated with romances often for that reason. So I felt that if you tone it down, if you put it at the side, and you have lives within the context of your story, more being, their entire life begins and ends with whether they are a couple with so and so.
Yeah.
More realistic, like more spiced up. And that's it, basically.
Okay. Yeah. What about though? When you've got say an action movie or something like that, and you have the B plot, which is the romantic subplot. So,
that's also my opinion. Sorry, I'm cutting in again, but that's also, in my opinion, shoehorned in. Because it becomes, and it's not a side dish anymore. It's like you are eating your main course, and then the waiter comes and he shoves an order while you are still chewing. And that never, even if it's the best thing ever, you will still not be immediately, at least, attracted to it. So there you go.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, it just sort of butts in. All right. So you're not talking about those romantic subplots that we have in action films all the time that don't often seem to be quite inappropriate.
No. I'm talking more about, like, people have personal stories and personal things that occur outside the main plot. Like, every character had a life before the plot began.
Yeah.
So sometimes these extra elements might become relevant. And that's what I mean as a side dish. Like, for example, you might have a detective that actually has a loving relationship, not necessarily being divorced, all these cliches, like the guy with the divorced wife or the daughter doesn't like him, and then she gets kidnapped and everything is sorted out afterwards when he saves her. No, I mean, like, he has a normal family life, and then something happens, and this relationship gets challenged, and he has to pay attention to it. It doesn't have anything to do with the plot, but it takes away his attention, and that makes him less efficient. Already an obstacle that doesn't tie into the plot in the sense that, his wife is also part of the plot, but she becomes a problem in him being efficient. Need him not to see something immediately for the plot to occur, for example, and things like that. You see what I mean?
How's he supposed to catch that killer when he has to take out the garbage? Is that what you're getting at?
Exactly. Yeah. And maybe part of the love that he has with his wife is that she tells him, do this first so that you won't get killed, and then we will see what happens. And that's why she actually loves him, because she supports him even though they have their own personal problems. And, things are parallel, for example. It feels a bit more realistic.
So we have nice organic love stories, organic romances that sort of, grow up naturally in the, not necessarily grow up, but, they formulate naturally within the work rather than being, as you say, shoehorned in with the hero and the heroine, just their eyes meet across a crowded battlefield. Love blooms.
And there is electricity or lightning, and out while the character zooms in.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
That's
like
what
that Jaws scene. Maybe a little bit different. But hey, there was a guy with a loving family.
What? Jaws.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all doing fine.
His pack mates in the shark pod. They miss him. That's the
They
bigger
missed the
tragedy.
shark. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Jaws, his brothers,
Yes.
or her sisters, or whatever they are.
Right.
The school. That's what I should call it.
I was thinking of Sheriff Brody, who had the family.
Oh, who cares about him?
You know,
it's the sharks we
silly
want to
goose.
know about.
That's true. Our shark.
Under the sea, with his mermaids and crab friends. You know.
Black eyes, like a doll's eyes. Yeah, that's true. We didn't see any of that.
All right, so like in your comic tons, obviously there's the thing between Maria and Basil. That's a result of some past history.
Basil. Maria is a great resistance.
Damn it! Yeah.
Yeah. Romance was flourishing way before the plot started, and it also died before the plot started for a while at least. And then this third wheel jutting in, trying to fill the void without being asked. And this is happening, this is taking place in parallel, has been taking place for a while now. And it is basically my way for stupid ulterior motives that this third wheel has, who is of course Orestes, and he wants make himself known on the map, because he actually doesn't. She knows he has affection for her, but it's irrelevant to her.
Okay.
Irrelevant. And she cannot imagine that this is a problem, a situation at hand.
Typical woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how proceed because of these issues that Orestes has will seem for a very big part that it is because that he has jealousy for Basil basically, and he wants to harm him in some way. Of course, that is the pretext.
All right.
And behind this, there are a lot of other things taking place that just have the excuse of the romantic issue.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah, that's the romance in my story is deadly a little bit.
Deadly romance. All right. So, what's the thing about keeping a romance as a side dish without it impinging onto the main plot? How do you sort of make sure that it doesn't take over? Because as webcomickers, we don't necessarily plan everything out, from beginning to end, and some of us do, but we can let things take over. We have that freedom, which is part of the beauty of the medium that we work in. So
yeah, it can be constantly changing, or it can drop in or drop out, or it could be just like an old sitcom kind of thing where you set up sort of a basic status quo and kind of keep that.
keep going back to
That's kind of
the
sort of
base.
what I did, although I'm trying to slowly maybe change things as time goes forward. But yeah, it's neat. There's just so many different things you can do. You can have, people. I've read older webcomics where people will have characters based on their own like relationships, and then you read 100 strips that extended over 7 or 8 years, and it's like this character is completely gone because they broke up. You know, the creator broke up with that person. So they just put in a fictional, lover or whatever instead. Yeah. I was just babbling to see if the echo kept going mostly. It seems like it's better now.
But yeah, so are there any strategies for? Well, no. I mean, it's not a strategy. Should you stop it from taking over? Should you keep it as a side dish?
Well, there's no rules really, right? But I mean, what would constitute something feeling shoehorned in? Maybe.
Yeah.
Like if
I think that. So please go.
I was just going to say if the because it would change the whole tone of your story if it became too much about romance, then, wouldn't it? And I think that's happened in some comics and some works when the relationship subplot has taken over. Even some TV shows and stuff like that. Relationship has gotten so important, and suddenly everything is secondary to it. And that can change your story. So it probably is a good idea to keep it down and not let it take over.
Yeah,
even if you're
the moonlighting, for if you're old enough, the moonlighting problem.
Oh,
maybe that's like renamed to the Friends problem. I don't know. I haven't really heard everybody say that.
Yeah.
Is Cheers the same? Well, that
Friends
kind
was
of
really all about that, wasn't it? Basically, like friends and lovers, and
I think
how
it got
everyone...
way. Yeah, it kind of always was, but it got so goopy and syrupy towards the end, though. The last little while.
And
as I recall.
Yeah, I hated that show. But to say...
really... So did I. I'm not lame. I always hated it.
But say Cheers, there was that as well, He had the... his would they, won't they romance with his bloody chief waitress. Two different ones. And it...
Yes.
You liked it, you bastard. But yeah, so Cheers, they had that, and that got a bit too much, the rest of the show got, which was a fantastic show. I loved Cheers.
I thought that helped. Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're totally right. But if I remember, and nobody cares who's listening about Cheers anymore, probably. But they're like, what are they even talking about? But I thought that show held up really well to the end. I thought they backed off on the romance. It was kind of bogging things down for a while. Is that what you were saying? Then they kind of, I think for the end, they pulled back and they made the new kind of female character was Rebecca when the other character left, and they toned it way down and they made her sort of kind of a wild comedic character in her own right. And she had her relationships outside of the male lead, outside of Sam. And it was always a disaster, and they made her such a loser, like the rest of the characters.
They made her too much of a loser in the end.
That could be.
In my point of view. She was a commanding businesswoman, and then turned her into an idiot, which I hated.
I was just, weirdly enough, I just read something about Cheers for some reason that talked about that and said, like, a lot of that had to do with fan backlash. Right. So they really didn't want her to be hated after, like, because people were really invested in the Diane character. So after that actress left, they, like, people hated Rebecca, like, as a replacement kind of person. So, they gradually just turned her into a complete wreck. And it was funny. She was hilarious. And I don't remember the actress's name offhand, but everyone knows who she is. But Kristen Scott Thomas, Sally Field. No, I know.
Sally Field. Shelley Long was the first one, and then Kirstie
Alley
was the second one.
Kirstie Alley, yeah. So yeah,
I'm the Oracle. I know.
Yes, the Oracle. She's amazing on the show. But anyway, whatever.
Yeah,
I thought that show did get bogged down with Diane and Sam, and later with Rebecca and Sam, kind of, but they seem to be able to overcome it somewhat.
Yeah,
these sitcoms and their romantic anchors, kind of, it's easy to get carried away. I guess,
The
for whatever reason.
romantic anchors. Well, yeah, I actually do think, yeah, then when the relationships become too important, then they do suck things in like a bit of a black hole. Like, say, Frasier, which is a spin-off for Cheers. Same sort of thing. The romantic subplot between Niles or Miles or whatever his name is and the
Oh yeah, and the housekeeper.
housekeeper lady.
So he loved her, and she was oblivious. That's what it was for a long time, right?
Which was great, yeah.
Daphne.
Daphne.
I'm remembering her name was Daphne.
That's it.
Just came to me.
And yeah, that became a bit too much, and yeah, so it's a good idea not to. If the romantic side dishes are great as a side dish, but you shouldn't let it take over. So
Yes.
yeah, that's a good
Garnish.
Garnish, yeah. Don't let it. Oh, I see how it came to you now.
I think just to add a little bit tidbit, that a good rule of thumb, letting it take over in a sense that it actually starts hurting the story. You have to always stop and think, would it realistically be the focus? Like in real life, is everything else okay enough to pay attention to this, or is something else happening that they would guys? So in that sense, it will keep you a little bit on track in a sense.
Okay.
Like for example, when you're being chased, there is no way in hell to stop to make out with someone.
Yeah.
That's right. It would ruin your chest.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Oh, people are shooting at us. Let's, please, honey, bend over while.
That could be. I mean, I don't know. People would be talking about that movie. I think might be onto something there.
No,
that they would be. Yes.
That is pretty typical for a hell of a lot of action films. They do that, and it's especially in the late 80s. They really got into doing that. These people who didn't know each other. Her boyfriend's just been her dad usually, or her mother has been killed, and suddenly she's in love with this guy, and they're having sex in the next scene, even though they're being shot at and everything like that. And maybe in some worlds and that's realistic, but mostly that's a bit stupid.
I don't think, and I'm not defending it by any means. Hey, I'm here too. I forgot. And I'm not defending it by any means, but I think, you want to think of realism in your story, but things like that also serve as kind of fantasy fulfillment. And that's the other part of the story. That's a lot of reasons why people tell stories is because there is an element of fulfilling some kind of fantasy in it. So I think that's what you're talking about, that type of scene is more for. It's not to be realistic, it's for fantasy fulfillment.
That's true. Yeah. That's a good point, but it can kick you out of it because then you think, why the hell are they doing this? It can kick you out of the your suspension of disbelief because you're thinking this doesn't fit. This is too odd if people handle that kind of thing poorly.
That makes me think that it would kick you out if you had set up the rest of your story as being quote unquote grittier or more realistic or whatever, and then you would be kicked out because that is something you wouldn't expect. If, however, you set your story up in a different way and you prime your audience to have more fantasies.
Yeah.
In a sense.
That's true.
Not the smart fantasies necessarily. I mean, like it's not realistic. It's for fun.
I know it's cartoony. It's heightened
to-
reality. That's what you mean.
Just yeah. Okay, then they will be fine. I think
Yeah. So that
exactly
was,
like Big Face.
the movies at the end of the 80s were very much like that. They were heightened reality, so that sort of fit a bit better. But into the 90s, then we started getting more gritty, more realistic films, a lot of them. So when they still tried to do that kind of thing, then it sometimes often failed. So yeah, you're right.
I
It's
remember-
tone. Both Pitt and you are
Like
totally
it's like
right.
a poster, like a Kodak. Sorry, like a Kodak moment. I don't even remember the movie. I don't remember the title. I just remember the scene. Like there is this couple met. Like they have only very recently met, and there hasn't been too much chemistry. I mean, okay, they're not hating each other, but you don't see extreme attraction between them. Anyway, so they are being chased. They are runaways.
Yeah.
Hide into a train. They hide into this train, which is like a not the passenger train, the ones with the merchandise in it.
Okay, freight train.
Yes. So the chasers also climbed the train and are starting to look through the. And while this is happening, they have sex on one of the crates. So,
Oh, God.
and I remember staring at this and saying, okay, the other guys are approaching. Are they going to be shot while, at the sweetest moment or something?
Yeah.
But it completely took me out of the story, exactly because they hadn't set it up in that way. It was supposed to be a very, what to the wall, realism, action, excitement, sort of thing.
Okay, yeah, I
So-
get ya. Well, there we are. That's a
Yeah.
perfect example. Yeah, so that's a movie where it doesn't fit and it's odd. Yeah. So don't do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Stay within the tone. I don't know. In Pinky TA, I don't think I've really got any romantic. Well, I did sort of have a romantic, slightly thing between Ace and Pinky at one stage, which was just so slight that you blink and you miss it. But I'm definitely open to doing more romantic side dishes in there between, side characters or whatever. I think that's a good kind of way to follow it and sort of spice up the story. It's interesting. How about you guys? I mean, go on, Baines.
No, go ahead.
No, tell us. People.
I have it in my comic, and I've sort of spent a lot of time trying to think about how to fix it so it's not so sitcom-y and it doesn't start to bog things down. I don't know if I've figured it out yet.
Okay.
And, I'm not really posting pages right now, but...
Well, yeah, you did have
Yeah.
sort of, lovey attraction or crushes kind of thing between characters.
Yeah, so it's kind of like figuring out, do I just keep that status quo? I don't. I know that gets boring. But making that too much the focus is, I don't know. I don't want to do that. So
How do you
that's
go
tough.
into it?
It's tough to
without
figure out.
Getting stuck. What about you, Pitsy?
So, I mean, I don't have. I was just kind of thinking, which is dangerous, but so yeah, not a lot of that happens in Putrid Meat. I mean, there's a little thing between Bones and Gretchen, but that's just kind of it's side thing, which is what we've been talking about. So, but what I've been thinking about though is, so I don't read or watch a lot of romances or anything like that. I never do. It's just not something I'm drawn to. But I was kind of trying to create, for instance, in my mind. So I'm kind of drawn to the other side of the spectrum. I like gratuitous violence in some forms. And, but it can relate, I think, to what we're talking about. So I'm just trying to create this translation in my mind to try and figure out, because there's some kinds of gratuitous violence I don't get that into, and there's some that I absolutely love. Like, for instance, I saw the first few Saw movies, and I mean, it was interesting as a concept at first, but after a while, I couldn't give less of a damn about them. And those are gratuitously violent. But I love stuff like both of the Dead Snow movies. I loved those. I love the Evil Dead movies. I love all that shit. Dead Alive, all sorts of stuff like that. Those are gratuitously violent. So what's the difference? I think the difference is, and this might be down to a matter of personal taste, but that kind of violence that I enjoy, there's maybe perhaps a bit of slapstick in it, which means there's something to complement that violence, to make it something more, sometimes more of a spectacle, sometimes funnier, but it gives it different undertones. Whereas, just watching someone try to work their way out of a trap for the 90 millionth time, be like, oh, are they going to die? Or are they not going to die in a horrible way? It's like, I don't know, man. Like, that gets old because it's the same old shtick. So it's just basically what we've been talking about this whole time. You know, is your romance just for the sake of romance, or does it have more to it? Does it? So I guess that I'm kind of rambling, but that's one of the reasons why I was so silent, was I was creating this connection in my mind to something I do enjoy, that I do watch, and it's at the completely other end of the spectrum. And so maybe there's this almost, I don't want to say universal, but close to universal, I don't want to say rule either, but theme that we could apply, that when you write anything, if you just, I don't know, just put a little something into it, you know. If we're not saying don't write romances, you know, what we're saying is, you know, don't write the 50 millionth romance that's about some guy chasing a girl, and, you know, why not write a romance about romance that a couple that has already been a couple for some time. And because things happen when people are already couples, you know, there's shit that happens all the time. I dare to say that, the stakes are probably higher for a couple who have been married for 20 years compared to, and have some investment in each other, compared to, I don't know, just some 30-year-old Friends show reject who finds some guy that she happens to like because they're both fucking pretty, and
Exactly.
we want to see what happens. You know,
Jennifer Aniston movies. Okay,
it's true.
Yeah, that's exactly it. But
I'm
I
going to
have
put
to
my
say
microphone back
that
on mute again.
no, that was great.
you do have
Oh, mic drop.
Kid Face. You do have some romance in and I could say that you have Bones and Gretchen, and when they begin in the story, you have, you know, the more carnal opportunistic relationship thing, and then now that it's coming to a close, they seem at least to have developed this different connection, because Gretchen has been waiting for him to come save Septica, basically, and that's why she gives him a beating, and it's not saved. And then you have this between them without ever needing to have them talk about, you know, oh, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways.
Okay. Well,
Yes.
yeah, they did have that like, you know, the initial attraction, and then it seems almost as if stuff happened off screen, doesn't it? And now they're getting back together. If this was it's almost like they've got that history, even though we saw them getting together. It was just so much that was unsaid when they did get together. So yeah, you're right in that. But Chance, I was just reading. Well, I was just reading. We were all reading your post, but one of the things that really got to me was so the romance can. Baines, what are you doing? This is... Tapping.
Who, me?
Yeah. There's a
My
On your
tapping?
face.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
It's like a drumming. Well, and yeah, I was
Can't I snap along with the Quackcast? Does that not work?
You're a cool cat. You're a cool cat.
Yeah.
But the point you made was that the romance can sort of lend a new perspective on the main plot. So yeah, say it's a war story or whatever that is, or whatever is the main thing that's happening. Your romance sort of gives you a different perspective on that, which is an interesting aspect.
Yes.
So yeah, you've got the couple.
Yeah.
In their relationship is defined in relationship to that bigger thing.
Yeah. Well, what I was thinking about when I said this is that sometimes circumstances test people's character, and of course, their relationships, and that includes a romantic relationship, are also tested, and things emerge that they may never have considered be them doing certain things and whatnot. So what the thing that I sort of love, I feel proud about in the romance that I have included, right, is that the plot happens to their pre-existing, in the sense that they were doing fine, they were gonna get married. I mean, their whole love story has taken place, and then the war comes and completely destroys this.
Okay.
And it's not that they have, like, okay, we are now estranged and we hate each other, and whenever we see each other we go like cats. It's that the whole learning to live with war thing happens, and then they regress to the mean, in a sense. They go back to what they left off now that they feel that they can handle certain things.
Yeah.
It's not like a get together. It's just they pick up what Martha said, like picking up where they left off.
Okay.
Now that they feel that they are competent and they can do certain things.
Right.
So they don't actually have a love conflict, is what I'm saying. It's just relationship, and whether it's official, it's not official, they have broken up or they haven't broken up, and everything. It's just a symptom of the war, and nothing further than that.
Okay. Well, but
If you know what I'm saying.
yes, yeah, of course. But the other sort of thing that I took away from that was that, well, at least in your post, was that in a romance, all the bigger things that happen naturally, all the big things with stakes and stuff like that, are not given the attention they deserve. This kind of minimized there, and it's almost as if they don't matter.
If you focus on the more romance, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas if you have the romance as a side dish, then these things realistically matter as much as they should. And your romance is the color that's happening, down below, which makes it more real in a sense, because it has this kind of realistic thing to bounce off against, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So...
You said it beautifully. I have nothing else to add.
So I like that aspect. I like that way of doing things. So, like, you can think of some movies that have a romance, as let me try and Kate and Leopold. Okay, so that's a weird romance thing where you have this guy that comes forward in future to have a romance with this lady, and so you've got one part of the story there which is time travel. This one of them has invented time travel, or him or her. I can't remember which. Yeah. One guy has invented time travel, so that should be the bigger story. But that's and the other part of it is this guy from the past has come into the future. So you think, my God, that's such a hugely interesting, weird thing. You know, how does he cope with this future world? But the romance takes over everything. And so all these other factors that should, lend it way more color aren't at all. It's everything is secondary to the romance. You think, well, I think that would have been a more interesting story if the time travel aspect and him not being able to cope or meeting his potential, great grandson would be way more interesting, and just have the romance as a side part in that kind of story. That's my perspective.
I agree. Or another way you could approach it too is so many of these romantic, especially the romantic comedies today, they kind of take love, and I'm talking about romantic love, as a face value, inherently good thing, and it's just a concept within itself. It's never really explored or discussed. But take a story, for example, when I was back in my Germanic studies, we read the Sorrows of Young Werther. And in that, love for that character is something destructive and self-destructive. And it, I don't know. So, I would enjoy to see more things today where love isn't kind of taken at this face value thing. If you think about it, love is something that can become quite possessive and once again, I am talking about romantic love, possessive, and it could even put you in shackles in a sense, in confines, or it could have all sorts of other different repercussions instead of just being like, oh, love, and when you have it, it's happiness and whatever. Just I would like to see more people play with it as a concept.
Right. So the love isn't the end goal. Love is something that's rather problematic once you get it. It's a bit of it's not so much a poison chalice, but it's a hot potato.
Yeah. It's one of those what you make of it things.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I have to say, to add to what Pete said, that although I really am not a fan of romance in movies for the reasons that we have already discussed, I do find myself watching much more easily and pleasantly quote unquote romance stories of Korean dramas, and the reason for that is that they don't, they do play with all these things. The romance is there, and it is quite an important element, but there is also a plot there happening, and the romance is a threat to the plot, or vice versa. For example, I'm thinking of this very cloak and dagger story about how a big corporation is falsifying police reports, in a sense, and is presenting things in a way that is beneficial to them and their corporate thing. Very, very parallax case style stuff. this within this frame, you have a romance happening, but it's so subtly introduced in a very subtle manner because the man and the woman never actually talk about being in love, and they never actually talk about, oh my God, I care about you, oh my God, my sun and moon and my stars and everything. They are both working towards a specific goal, and they are thrown together not because they are in love or whatever,
Because they
but
have a
because
shared goal.
circumstances. Yes, and they have to work together.
Yeah.
And often, sometimes, because especially the guy is very much infatuated and everything, and he efficient as the woman, and that is an issue that he gets called out on often, and things like that. So that makes it alluring to me.
Okay.
And yeah, and sometimes the romance doesn't work good.
Yeah. The non-working romances are really that's a good twist when they don't work out, because that gives you a bit of a
It's
surprise.
so unusual for most movies and stuff like that. Yeah, it's nice.
It's unusual, and the problem is romances are inevitable once they begin. They are like a train that can't be stopped. That is going to happen. Once you see that begin, it's like when a character in a historical movie starts to cough. That character's going to die of some unnamed illness. That's going to happen. So yeah, once their eyes meet, you know that plot is going to come to fruition. So it's good when you can surprise people by changing it. But when we're saying all this about having romances as a side dish, a side plot, it's not bad to have the whole focus of a movie or a comic or whatever as a romance. They still have their place, don't they? I mean, we're just talking in favor of this kind of way of approaching it, because a romantic, something that is just focused on romance, that's fine. They can be good, fun things to watch, enjoyable. But yeah, the side dish kind of way is a good way of approaching it. I thought I should clarify that, because I was I think I was at fault by sort of steering us towards, those romances are bad, but these kind of romances are good. But yeah, that's bullshit. Pure romances.
I think I would
okay.
say that, of course, if you couldn't, and often you do have a romance as the main plot, the main issue, but there has to be, in my opinion, at least to have a good romance, there has to be a reason why it is the main issue. Romeo and Juliet worked because the main issue was not that they will he won't he. They were already, happy for whatever reason. The issue was that they couldn't marry for very social reasons, for example. And there was a reason why it would be central to these characters, from their socio-economic background to their age. Of course, it would be the main thing for them. And also another story comes to mind where you have this very medieval king in a caste system, and he falls in love with this slave girl. But in order to even be able to actually talk to her, he has to devise ways to, and that is basically a big part of the whole romance. The lady to be in a position to even have access to him. And of course you have romance there.
Yeah.
That is the central element of the plot. That's what I mean.
Okay. Yeah. It's not the man and woman inevitably falling for each other and everything reviling. revolving around that particular thing. I think of Twilight, which I've never seen and I can't really comment on properly. But that's the.
And I have seen it.
You have?
I have seen it. Yes.
How would you rate that as a romance?
What?
How would you rate Twilight as a romance?
Oh. Well, the first thing would be it. I would first set up at odds with the vampire mafia that they have going on, and would have the boy actually want to eat the girl.
What, sexually?
And way, basically in the vampiric role.
Of course.
Yeah, I would have him attack her to eat her, and his family would have to restrain him, and then they would have to, and then they would have to see why he cannot resist this woman and stuff like that. And I don't know if I would write it as a romance. I would write it as a horror story where gets eaten. No.
That would make it a much better
step
story.
of the way. And then she does get eaten, and the paterfamilia has to turn her in order for her to survive, and she hates it, and she now develops this intense hatred of the guy. And then that's the rest of the story of her.
And then she's attracted
Manifest
to.
her hate.
And then she's attracted to the werewolves, like she runs from one
Or
to the other guy.
Or she purposefully hitches up with a werewolf that likes her, just to get back at the guy that hates werewolves or something like that. In any way, I would not have him be. I mean, he's supposed to be 70 years old, right? Be still interested to high school unless he was a pedophile, basically.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, who wants to go back to high school, for crying out loud? Everybody is glad it's over.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But those are romantic. I haven't seen them either, but they're like. Oh, sorry, Tans. I thought you were done.
Please
but
go.
They're like romantic fantasies, right? Like that is the focus of those books and movies, I think. I haven't seen them either, but like you'd consider those romances. And then all the monster stuff is kind of just window dressing, garnish.
Yes, basically.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right, well, consider, say... I'll go on Tans.
I would be very bad and say that it just reads like fan fiction.
Yes. Well, on that point,
Basically.
I was going to say consider, of course, Interview with a Vampire, which the whole Twilight's based on. So Twilight's based on not necessarily that movie, but it's based on the fiction of Anne Rice. So it's fan fiction of Anne Rice fiction. But in, say, Interview with a Vampire, there's a weird kind of subplot side dish romance between the Brad Pitt character and the Tom Cruise character. It's a really strong kind of romance between those kind of characters. It was a weird relationship, and between the Brad Pitt character and the Christian Slater character, between the Brad Pitt character and the Antonio Banderas character. So they have all these kind of weird romantic subplots between these characters.
Yeah.
And that is a different way of approaching the whole vampiric love thing. But that sort of talks... I'll go on.
Vampire, it was a great example that you brought up, because Personally, I liked the movie. I haven't read the book. But the thing that is well made there, in my opinion at least, is that the vampires' vampiric nature and their existence and how they time and through society is as much of a focus as they have going on between them. And the issue of the girl vampire grows up to be a woman, but her body doesn't age. That is a very interesting concept.
Yeah.
And it is explored aside everything.
That is an interesting part of it, but it also means that she is not available as a romantic partner to any of the characters. So that means Anne Rice sort of made it so they can only be attracted to each other and not, there's no female characters allowed to be part of the romantic triangles here.
Maybe they were in the closet. How do you know that?
I think they were totally out of the closet. I think it was pretty obvious what they're all after. But yeah, that is the romantic sort of subplots. Even if you don't see them ever consummated, the romantic attraction between those characters is an extremely strong part of that film. Interview with a Vampire. That's those connections are extremely strong, and it does. They aren't the whole focus. So it is not a romance film. This is meant to be a vampire film. But I would say they were like 40% that, 60% vampire film. So I think that's a good example of that.
I would say that it's 50-50.
Okay, yeah.
The romance often becomes an issue that advances the vampiric plot. Or the dangers that they are exposed to happen because of the romance issues. Feel just to a point, in the sense that when a vampire sires another vampire, I mean, if the other guy was a woman, you know what would have happened for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe there is a more attraction between them or something. I mean, it ties in very well to the whole vampiric, at least the way that Anne Rice has defined it, which did not involve a lot of glitter.
Yeah.
And it involved a lot more horror to it than, glitter.
Yeah.
than
more
glitter.
horror than glitter. Yeah.
Yes.
She had a better balance. That's what you're saying, really? You're right. Vampire fiction is very much tied around romance. Not so much. I haven't actually ever read the Bram Stoker. I haven't read his version, but I've seen the adaptions for film, of course. So you've got the one with Gary Oldman, which was a rather good film. It's rather freaky, and you have the central romantic subplot between the wooden Keanu Reeves, who could have used himself as a stake to carry on, and his the woman, I can't ever remember her name, who gets turned into vampire. So she's attracted to the vampire Dracula, and she's attracted to him, and he wants to save her because he loves her, and so that is very much a part of it. So that's interesting. Yeah, the vampire films need the romantic subplot. It's central to them. It's interesting.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a vampire movie that doesn't have it. I mean, a lot of them are kind of the lead character is a dude who falls for a female vampire.
Buffy the Vampire
Yeah.
Slayer.
White Boys?
Well, that's different, but like Fright
Well-
or Lost Boys,
Lost Boys. That does have it.
Lost Boys, not White Boys.
Near Dark which was another kind of scarier, better vampire movie. I thought came out
Okay.
around the same time.
I haven't seen that one.
It's more obscure. Yeah, it's really good though. Well, way back then it was really good. I haven't seen it in a long time, but
Blood and
Or you
Sugar,
have,
yeah.
what, Fright Night? I loved Fright Night, and in that one, there was a romantic triangle. The vampire wanted the main character's girlfriend at some point.
Yeah.
So it's like your sort of basic. Yeah, it's kind of always
Blackula, of
Kinda
course,
there.
the classic.
Blackula.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, What We Do in the Shadows. There's the most recent vampire movie I saw. It was really good.
Okay.
And there are sort of romantic, just side dishes, just exactly what we're talking about. They were sort of part of the characters, but they didn't overwhelm things at all. They were sort of really well placed.
Yeah, it's
At
interesting
all.
that vampire films really are a good example of the romantic side dish. I was thinking of Underworld. That's again, you have very strong
That's Romeo and
romantic
Juliet with
side dish.
vampires, isn't it?
Yeah.
A bit, yeah. Yeah, so you have that strong romantic side dish, and that lends stuff to the rest of the movie. Blade. I haven't ever seen Blade. I have to watch the Blade film.
Oh, maybe there's no love story, and maybe there is. I don't. Yeah, it's been too long.
No, I think that there isn't actually. There is, like, he pairs up with I mean, they have to cooperate. Actually, romantically involved in the end, which
Right.
is something very unusual.
Yeah.
Okay. How many films are there in the Blade?
3.
Really.
Okay, 3. I thought there was 4 now.
No, you're thinking of Blades of Glory, the ice skating movie. I'm just kidding. How would I know what you're
was laughing,
thinking?
Baines. I was
Thank
laughing.
you.
You're welcome.
I was
Also, I came up with the
laughing. I was
Blade
like,
thing. That was
You
mine. I saved the Quackcast.
Ah, jeez. All right, I think we've come to the end of this Quackcast, and we can definitively say that vampire films are the best romantic side dish films ever.
I like how we settled on vampire films for some reason.
They're superior. They're the master
Except
race.
Twilight.
Oh,
Except
It's
Twilight.
the best example of how not to do the romance thing, even if it's the main course. Like, please don't cook it up that way.
yeah. Turn it into a romantic comedy, which are the best romantic comedies. Because romance should be funny. All right. So this
And
is...
gratuitously violent.
Yep.
This has been Quackcast number 336, and we've been the Quackcast crew. Pitsy, Tansy, Bainesy, and Oozy.
Ozzy.
No, I ooze. All right.
That's your street name.
Thank you for joining us to get a little love on the side.
We won't tell your wife.
Oh,
That's
I
right.
was waiting for who would make the quartet joke, but nobody did.
Who would make the what?
Guys.
What joke?
Foursome.
I'm not going to repeat it. I'm glad it got cut out.
Our romantic foursome.
Think out of you though.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.